Well, I just have to say, what a jerk. I mean, really. We've met several rich men in the Gospel of Luke thus far. Some of them wind up being all right. They realize that they've done something wrong. They repent. Jesus welcomes them in. But this guy, whew, what a piece of work. I mean, he walks past his gate every single day, seeing Lazarus and refusing to help him. It's not like Lazarus is halfway across town or halfway around the world. He has no excuse, and yet he still chooses not to help him. We even find out after their death that this guy knows Lazarus's name. He knew him, and he still chose not to see him as human, not to care for him when he clearly had the means. And he doesn't even really feel bad about it. He just feels bad about the consequences. I think this guy's a piece of work. And I think the story is satisfying in some ways. You know? There's a phrase that some use that I won't use in church, but I'll do a modified version. You mess around, you find out. You don't need to know what the original is. And it is satisfying, but for me at least, there's just a couple things that can make it hard to believe that this story really comes to pass in our world. And I've built my sermon around that, so I just want to do a quick survey to see if I'm the only one or if maybe you all agree with me. I hope maybe some people agree with me, otherwise I'm going to have to throw this out. And I want to be clear, when I start asking you questions about what you think or what you believe, it's not a test. Reverend Tom and I are not writing down who said what. And you're also not swearing permanent allegiance, okay? You could wake up tomorrow morning and change your mind. I'm just curious what you think right now. Do folks believe in life after death? Raise your hand if you do. Okay, some of us do. Do folks believe in hell after death? Considerably fewer hands, but some, okay. Are there maybe folks who think that heaven and hell are more things that we create for ourselves on earth? Anyone feeling that? I've got some nods, I've got some hands, okay. Are there any folks who think that no matter what happens after death, it's important to have justice here and now for those who are alive? A lot of hands. Okay. So for me, this story has some good news in that eventually we get some justice for the poor man Lazarus, who's met with compassion and a banquet with Father Abraham. The thing that's more complicated is that Lazarus still had to live his whole life on earth in torment, really. And the thing that's also more complicated to me is that this is a parable. It's a story that Jesus is telling. But if I don't know that I believe in hell or torture after death, then do I really believe that the rich man is being held accountable at all? And I'm going to say it's a bold move for me to open up the sermon by telling you all my problems with the text. But I also didn't think I could avoid it. Because otherwise I can get up here and say, do the right thing, don't do the wrong thing, and then sit down, and maybe you all would be happy because you could leave early and maybe make it to the St. Patrick's Day parade. But then Reverend Tom would tell me that I didn't do my job. So I can't do that. Instead, I want us to think about whether this story is really believable or plausible, and whether it feels like enough. I mean, When I think of who in the world reminds me of this rich man, this rich jerk, really, I think of the people who have access to bombs and private islands and money, who are tormenting innocent people in our country and around the world. And I wonder, will they ever really be held accountable? That's a very heavy question. I also, in reading this story, realize a tendency in myself to distance myself from the people in it. I may not be the poor man who occupies a place in society that's the lowest of the low, but neither am I this rich jerk. I care about people. I do my best. And it allows me to distance myself from the harm that I might be causing, because at least I'm not him. And I'm going to deal with these two problems first with the distance problem, and then with this bigger question of, is this story believable and is it enough? First of all, the distance. I think if you, like me, don't fully see yourself in either Lazarus or the rich man, we might be right in some ways. You remember the end where he says that he has 5 brothers? We're kind of the 5 brothers. We're the ones who have a choice to make about which way we'll go, and we have to figure it out. But the whole point of this story, right, is for us to learn from the mistakes of the rich man so that we don't make them ourselves. And so I think it might be helpful for us to reflect on the times when we knew better and we still did wrong. And since I'm going to ask you to do this, I'll do it myself first because it wouldn't be fair otherwise. I'm going to tell you this morning that I am really good at boycotting some things. When I was in college and I found out that Amazon workers had to work under really exploitative conditions in the warehouses and the trucks, I canceled my Amazon account and I have never looked back. When I found out that Starbucks was keeping their workers from unionizing, I stopped going to Starbucks, with the one exception of buying my mom her favorite latte in the last couple weeks of her life, which I think might be justified. Of course, I've known for a long time that Chick-fil-A has a documented history of advocating against LGBTQ+ people. In the house where I grew up, this was considered a plus, but once I grew up and came to terms with my own identities and took a stance, I decided no more Chick-fil-A. But I will tell you, friends, that on the stretch of I-90 between upstate New York and Boston, which I've driven many times because I have loved ones in both places, there's a spot where a lot of the rest areas have Chick-fil-A's, and I do really like the taste of their chicken nuggets. And, as a queer person, I can get a freebie every now and then, right? And there are some times when I stop and eat Chick-fil-A when I make that drive. Putting that on the record. And the last thing that I have to confess that I'm really not proud of is that I still use Spotify. Even though I've known for years that they don't really pay musicians very well for the music that they stream, and even though we found out last year that they were airing ads recruiting people to become ICE officers. And I can justify it by saying, I don't know, it has a decade of my listening history that I don't want to lose, or I at least use the free version, so I'm not giving them my money. But the reality is that I just am tired of having to give stuff up, and I know it's bad, and I do it anyway. And I can say that I'm still better than the rich man, because at least I feel bad about it. But I have to ask myself, does God call me to feel guilty and then not do anything? Hey, God, I'm sorry, I'm doing bad stuff. I feel really bad about it, though. That counts for something, right? I don't think that's what God calls us to do. And I'm not saying that any of us can be perfect. We live in a really messy, complicated world where our actions have unintended consequences, and You could spend all day boycotting every company that's ever done anything wrong, and then you'd never buy anything. But when I know better and do it anyway, that's when I have to reckon with where I see myself in this story, in the rich man. Can anybody relate? Am I the only person who sometimes knows better and I do the bad thing anyway? Okay, some of you are affirming that it's not just me. Thank you. Well, friends, I think we can safely say that maybe we're not so different from the rich man after all, but as the 5 brothers, we get to make a choice. Maybe I've solved that problem. But what about the problem of, is it really believable that this rich jerk gets held accountable? This powerful man has to answer for the things that he's done. Do we really believe that that's possible? And furthermore, what is our role in it? If God asks us to do better, then how can I decide not just to feel bad for the poor man, but to actively stand up on his side? Well, Barbara Brown Taylor, who's an Episcopal priest, she's preached on this text, and here's what she said. Even if you don't believe that God is going to punish someone after death for what they've done, we can see in a way that the rich man is actually just punishing himself by getting exactly what he asked for. He wanted to live his life as though poor people didn't exist and he didn't have to think about them. That's what he thought he wanted, until he asked Lazarus, the poor man, to come fetch him some water and learned that, without poor people, I don't have my servants. You see, there's some power in giving people exactly what they ask for. For the rich man, it meant that there was a chasm between him and Father Abraham, maybe even between him and God. And I wonder, perhaps that's what God is asking me to do. To help people like the rich man think through what it would really mean to get what they ask for. In 2005, when I was a small child, I'm told that there was legislation proposed called the Sensenbrenner Bill. Does anyone here remember that? It was a bill that would have changed the law, which had previously said that crossing into the U.S. without documentation was a civil misdemeanor offense. It would have changed it into a felony, criminalizing undocumented immigrants. This was in 2005, but the protests were going through 2006. And the immigrant community decided that if they say they want a country without us, then we're going to give them what they ask for one day. And on May 1st of 2006, immigrants, millions of them across this country, stayed home from work. They did not go to school, they did not shop, and instead they protested. And my friends, meatpacking plants had to shut down. The industries that immigrants run in this country, or rather that they make run in this country, could not continue to operate. And that legislation, which would have made it a felony to be undocumented in this country, failed. Not because God from on high made it fail, but rather because people understood that if you give them what they ask for, they realize, this is not going to work out for me. Doesn't always work out that way, of course. But when I see this story through this lens, it makes it a little bit more plausible to me that if we can commit to working together, all of us brothers of the rich man saying, I know what side of the chasm I'm standing on. Not just that I feel pity for, but that I will actively commit to standing on. Then maybe we can hold those rich jerks accountable. What happens after death, I don't know. They haven't taught me that yet in seminary. But together, we can be perhaps like the other rich men in the Gospel of Luke. those tax collectors who said, I've done wrong and I'm giving back what I took, who said, I'm going to stand in solidarity with the poor and oppressed. So while I'm not asking you to stake a claim on heaven or hell, I am asking, can we commit to making heaven on earth? So that when we see Lazarus outside of our gate, we stop and help him. May it be so. Amen.